Hey, Susan Lennart-Kasmer here. Welcome to the Alchemy of Soldering. I am trained as an artist, not as a goldsmith, so I feel like I have a whole different approach to jewelry, the whole jewelry making process. I feel like I'm a right brain jeweler is what I call myself. So if you've actually had a lot of, taken a lot of courses where you're going into into the colleges and, you're really kind of learning this real structural in the box type of techniques, I want to make things a little bit more fun and a little bit easier and explain this from a right brain type of perspective. That's what Alchemy of Soldering is all about. Also, just to give you a little bit of history about myself, after art school, I actually spent a lot of time traveling and I really got into studies of culture. I didn't even realize until I was done with college how much I loved culture and particularly adornment. I love adornment. You can see I'm wearing some really big pieces now. So the type of work that I do large sculptural pieces. I've done pieces for museum exhibits that are in frames that are really used to describe to give you a description, to give you an emotion about what you're looking at. I've done work for commercial lines for Michaels. That was a huge, really low-end commercial line. I've done fashion. So really where I started off was in fashion. I used to do jewelry for Nordstrom, for Henry Bendel, for Banana Republic, Ann Taylor, Proving Connection, and I did work in Elle magazine. Right now, I'm so excited. I was asked by Vogue Accessories, Italian Vogue Accessories, and I put together a beautiful body of work that's just really for the wall and runway. And then what I do from there is I do trickle down pieces that are really wearable and fun and reasonable. So that's kind of the way I work. I've done all different markets and mediums. So my approach in Alchemy of Soldering today, I want to show you how and why things work. You're going to hear me talking through this whole piece. Another thing is for many years I was in education and I traveled a lot. I do a lot of courses where we're really building from the culture. So I have done work in Paris where we've gone out and our workshop and we've just collected things in Paris and brought them back and built with a small studio setup. So my interest, I want to really turn you guys on to a soldering setup that's for $200 or $250 or under, depending on what you're going to spend. I really like the idea. In my life, I love the idea of simplification. Simplification. I've spent the past few years just simplifying and then expanding. Then I can expand what I want to do. All of my pieces that I have on have been built with this $250 setup. So it's kind of nice. For me, it's a lifestyle. I really, I have really nice tanks, expensive equipment, but I love the idea. What really inspired me, I went back into, as I was decommercializing in my life, I went back into Mexico and I just brought a few tools with me and I just wanted to see what I could build with a few tools. When you have less, your creativity has to expand and you're doing work that no one else does. So the more complex you get with tools, and believe me, I love tools also, but the more complex you get with tools, the easier it is to have your work replicated. So I really come from the background of building talisman. So I love these little marks and little mars and ways that you can tell that a piece is handmade. So that's what you're going to find in my work. Also in Alchemy of Soldering, you're going to make mistakes at the beginning. I'm going to encourage you to make mistakes. My approach that I'm showing you how to build your work, you're going to see, I'm not judging on materials you're using or mistakes you make. It's your problem and your responsibility to get into your studio. You can watch this you can watch this course over and over and over again. Get in, build a couple times. Go back and just watch a couple things here and there. I love the idea that you're not coming out to my shop, out to my studio to take your course. You're at home with your own setup. It's not expensive to get into. And now you know, are working in your space. When I come into my space is set up. I'm a true believer in energies and talisman. I do actually a lot of yoga and a lot of yoga work and energy work. So for me, it's like when I set up my studio, I have my studio set up so I can just walk in, I'm in a calm place, and I can come at my work. One of the things that I like to teach in all the way that you're using tools from the very beginning is to really do some very brief clearing. Anything from I come into my studio after doing yoga where I'm super clear, and then I'm not frustrated or I'm not mad at myself. You know, it's really important to relax and to be able to come into your work. And it just is a matter of taking like 3 deep breaths. And actually it's a yoga breath, it's just an inhale. You know, and you're bringing this breath all the way into you, and then an exhale, clearing it out. So anytime you're gonna find a lot more success in your work if you just take 3 of those deep breaths, and then you're gonna come at your work in the morning. So I'm gonna show you a number of different tricks and techniques. I don't want you to be stressed out on getting, you know, everything has to be perfect. I'm actually working the opposite in that way. I'm an artist, I want you to have fun, I want you to learn this foundational technique so then you can have fun and just really build in your medium as an artist. So I think that's what makes this course really unusual and different. I know many times when I was learning silversmithing as a goldsmith, you really get smaller and smaller and closer into this tight box of rules. There really are a lot of rules on how to do things right. And it's really good to have this foundation so you can have so much fun. I have a couple things that I do working, you know, where I can actually just add things in afterwards. Sometimes, you know, it's really fun. You guys will see my courses as I go and teach. So I have, you know, I actually have some of my really big work on that I'm building. I'm actually getting ready to do a workshop in Morocco where we're touring, we're absorbing the culture, and then we're going back and we're building these pieces. So we're all bringing this small studio setup that I'm about to just slowly introduce you to all the tools. You can put them in 2 little Ziploc bags, throw them on the plane. The only thing you have to worry about is, you know, through Amazon you can get this butane gas. This cannot be shipped. Well, Amazon ships it, so you can get this from Amazon, but it actually has a notch in here. So everything else here you can just throw into 2 Ziploc bags and you're on your way. And I'm super excited about just eliminating any of my big tools and getting into this small studio setup. Years ago, when I wrote a book on cold joints, I actually, for 3 years, I didn't do any soldering. I just kind of walked around the world and put together my own, you know, my own ideas just by looking at architecture, looking at the way things are put together. So in this case, with Alchemy of Soldering, I actually, for the past 3 years, I have not used any other tools except what you're gonna see here, this simplified version of tools. The only exception is I actually am going to be looking to get a hand drill in my work. I'm gonna show you an electric drill. Not even in this course, but in the next one. And I built all of my jewelry that I have here. I can build anything I want to with this tool setup that I'm going to show you. So you're going to see you can really get these bracelets here. You can get the ring that's on this finger here. I'm exactly showing you this, but I'm showing it in a pendant form. How to build a stone, how to make a bezel, how to add a little bit of color and beauty to it, you know, and some crystals too. And you guys, you'll be able to go from there. Also, I have on this pendant necklace here that actually is a chakra necklace. This all has to do with what we're building today, the individual stones. Okay, so Alchemy of Soldering, here's the tools. I'm gonna start one by one. This is what really is important. This is actually a double. This is a rotating block. I love this rotation on here because this allows me to be able to get move this around and hit all angles when I get going with my solder. You'll see all of this later. This actually is a really hard brick. Normally I would have this softer brick that's in here. This is actually a fireproof soldering brick. This one is softer. You'll see why I love this soft brick. I can put pins in here. I can really move this around. You know, it can be marked into easily, and it works well for me. When I start teaching you the whole philosophy of soldering with Alchemy of Soldering, we're really working off of these two screens. I am showing you, you know, if you've ever played pool before, it's actually with the angle of the flames that I'm putting in here. I'm using, if I'm working with small pieces like the necklaces or this ring stack, I'll just use a really light screen. But because I'm working with my flame, that's pretty cool, which I'll talk about that one in a minute. You really need to be able to heat up your screens, and it's almost like you're annealing a lot of your metal. So I'm going to be using these screens to heat up to help me create heat to solder all of this work. Now, I'm going to just really talk about the torch. It was so hard at first, years ago, to learn this torch. Now that I did learn this torch, I almost went back to my acetylene and propane. But butane is so beautiful in so many different ways, and I'll tell you why right now. Okay, butane, it's a cooler gas. So the way the gases run is butane is one of the least, it's at the lowest amount of heat, butane. So to do those big pieces that I showed you, you have to create a lot of heat. You know, so that's where I'm using these screens to get a lot of heat created, and I'm working close to my board. You can't work up in the air because we don't have a lot of heat from the butane. Universally, I found when I would travel into France and travel down into Mexico and down into South America and teach a workshop, really the universal gas that I found was butane. So I started really figuring out how to use butane. Rather than, the next up is the propane that a lot of people solder with. Back in time, there was gas that, back in time and even now, oh my gosh, when I studied Native American Indian soldering, and literally people would use bellows with propane to get your gas hotter. The next step up as far as heat would be oxygen propane, and that you're mixing oxygen with your propane so you're getting a hotter gas. With these type of gases, you're gonna get in and out really quickly. Acetylene is what I used to use. They're really big tanks of acetylene. It's much hotter. It's a dirtier gas, which means you get a lot more fire scale. When I talk about clean metal, it means that there's no oils or fire scale on there, and I'll talk about how to clean all of this up and you know how this all works as we get into the course. So you know I really like to repeat things over and over. I feel like different ways that I can show things, the information just sinks in slowly, and pretty soon you're like, yay, I have it. So then there actually is acetylene oxygen, which is what the brazing when you're working with steel is what you'd use. So here we're on the nice butane gas. The other beautiful thing about butane gas that I love is you can work in any studio space. When I used to work with my acetylene, I was in a hardware store downstairs and there were people living upstairs. You have to have such good ventilation. You really need those masks. So not only with your oxygen acetylene and your, with your oxygen propane, you really need good ventilation. Today it's pretty cool because I don't have to have a loud noise of the gas on here. All of that gas rises. It rises up in the air, so the carbon monoxide alarms would go off, at night. By the time the gas got upstairs, people would say, "What are you doing down there?" My carbon monoxide is going off. So that gas rises. The nice thing about butane is that butane sinks. So you're literally not breathing that in. You could wear a mask if you wanted to. You don't have to wear a mask. I mean, if you really want to be cautious, I have been a jeweler for over 25, 27 years doing my jewelry. So I take care of all parts of my body, and I'll get into that, in different parts of this next course. But you know, really my hands are my tools. Sorry, you guys are gonna have to see a little bit of dirty hands today. I'm trying to keep them clean, my fingernails, but my hands really are my tools. I work with my fingernails as much as I work with my hands and my arms. You know, I hold tools appropriately, and I wanna make sure that I'm not breathing in toxic, heavy air. So I love my butane. It sinks down, and really, so I'm not breathing it in. So this is actually the torch. This is a $25 torch head, and it just slips right on here. You're gonna see a little cut right here. Slips right on, and you're gonna turn it and just flip it on. Sometimes I'm gonna be using my flame tiny, and sometimes I'll be using my flame really high. So you guys will get to see, and it stays on once you hit it. So, you know, I'm gonna show you different ways I'm working. I work a lot higher up. I just wanted you guys to be able to see everything going on here. So this is the butane. This is $25. This is like a couple dollars. You can get them at hardware stores, Lowe's, Home Depot, or Amazon. So that's $25. You know, the next thing is, as I showed you, this one is about $25 or $30. I've got the whole breakout. There's a whole list. You can see the screens. I'll show you different angles. These actually are the priorities right next to me, and then I'll talk about solder. So hang on. These are the priorities right here. I actually love the scratch brushes. I didn't start off with this scratch brush here, but this one actually is from the jeweler store. It's like $20. These are steel brushes, and they literally can get in there and clean things up and scratch things up. What I'm trying to do through Alchemy of Soldering is I want to show you how to take who you are and build your own work as an artist through the medium of silversmithing. So that's kind of what I do. It's like you're gonna see, you know, because I do have that history of the museum pieces, you're gonna see, you know, that's what really I'm trying to do, is to introduce you, find out who you are, and get your own work in here after you learn this technique. So these actually, the scratch brushes are really for nice cleanup. This one is from Home Depot or any place like that, but this nice one on the end is nice too. So these are steel brushes. They give you a beautiful shiny surface. This is a steel brush. It's called a steel pen. I have a file. I do have a bench pin that I have put in over there. You guys will see the bench pin. I'll work with my filing on the side. That is more down the road as you expand. I have locking pliers. Love, these are so essential and so beautiful to use. I can clip pieces onto here and just get in and do my soldering in that way. So these are beautiful to use. They don't come apart. Anytime I'm working with pieces, I always want to make sure that I'm saving my wrists. So I'm not squeezing onto a piece, you know, I'm not holding on with pliers or tweezers the whole time as I'm trying to get a piece soldered. I actually just clip, you know, I'll clip an end into here that you guys will see later on. I'm just gonna clip it into here, and now I don't have to use my wrists at all, and I can work in that way. So all of my tools that I have here, I've really explored on keeping your body healthy and not getting carpal tunnel and all of that. A marker, this is so important. The cool thing is about markers is that you can solder on top of marks. So a lot of times when I'm soldering ends together, I mark both ends. When you're soldering pieces like this, these ring bands here, or soldering together a bangle bracelet, I'm gonna put marker marks on the end where I'm soldering it together so I can find my ends. Hopefully if you have it put together beautifully enough, you're not gonna even be able to see where you need to solder. So that's where the marker can go on there magically, and luckily, permanent marker can be used and you can solder right on top of it. Yay, it saves you, trust me. This actually is the soldering pick, and it's titanium soldering pick. I use this at all times in my work. This is really my right hand tool. If I don't have a paintbrush in my hand, I have this pick. So in either hand, I either have a paintbrush or my titanium pick. These are your two main tools that I'm gonna have in my dominant hand. I'm actually ambidextrous, so in this, usually I'll use my right hand. Many times I use my left hand as well. So, but you really want to, you want to have your torch in your left hand if you're right-handed, and either one of these two little nice tools in this hand. If you don't even want to, sink your money into a titanium pick, this is actually at Harbor Freight or on Amazon, and it's like 50 cents or $1. It's steel. You can get in there and move things around the same way. The thing that I like this one is it protects my hands from getting too hot. The other thing is I just put together, I just threw this in now, it's a polishing cloth. By the time you get done cleaning with the steel brush, it's kind of nice. It has rouge in there and just kind of, I still do like a nice darker kind of rougher, but you can get in there and shine it up. This is nice just to have laying around in your house. Many times when you're wearing your bangles, they're going to be beautiful and clean rings, but if you put something away in a drawer for like a month, you can take it out, polish it with your cloth, and you're nice and shiny again. You can go out looking nice. These I use as my snips. These are actually beautiful snips to cut into metal. You can also find snips like this in the dollar store. They're called bone cutters. They're, just these really cooking type of scissors that can cut deeply into my metal, and you're gonna see. I'll talk about my metal in a little bit. I showed these pieces here. Sandpaper. Sandpaper is really gonna come in handy. I just buy a really big package of it at Lowe's or Home Depot. You can just spend a couple bucks and get like 10 to 20 sheets. I use two different grits. I'll use like a 120 and a 220. I love kind of a little scratchier surface. So those are my sandpapers that I use. This is liver sulfur. It's that really kind of stinky, but it's not a toxic product at all. In my studio, I try to keep things very non-toxic. So this actually will darken. It really is a mineral of sulfur, so you're gonna smell that lovely smell of sulfur. But I put this in a crock pot, and in fact, there is my crock pot right up here on the top. I'll show you inserting a little bit of this in here once I get the course going. And this actually, maybe just like a teaspoon goes into that little crock pot of hot water, so I keep it hot. The one on the bottom over here is a crock pot. You can buy these crock pots for $10 at Walmart or $20 on Amazon. I usually find these for $10, which is why they're big. You could buy a jeweler's pot, but they're smaller, which is wonderful, but they are a little bit more expensive. So buy a $10, $20 crock pot. They're big. That's for the pickle. Right in front, I just have Rio pickle. And but what pickle really is, back in time when people were mixing pickle actually is lemon juice and vinegar, is basically that combination. It became more sophisticated back in time. So with this, it's so interesting. I did a workshop in Indonesia and all over, and I still see to this day, it's so interesting to see the different tools and different fluxes and pickles that people use to get their soldering done. And it really, brings me to the idea of just the simpler soldering. When I was in Indonesia, I got to watch this whole process. It was so beautiful. There were these little red berries that grow in Indonesia that they cut open, and they have this gel, and they used as flux. This is our flux here. So we have, we can buy these from, I just buy things from jewelers now, but I did have the wonderful opportunity to, really get back to the basics in my life as far as materials. And literally, I went in the middle of nowhere in Mexico, and I was with a friend of mine who grew up without Rio Grande. We grew up without Rio Grande, trying to figure things out. And literally we would buy from the bank fine silver coins, melt them down, throw in brass, throw in bronze, heat them up, pour it into an ingot, roll it through the rolling mills, and we would make our own wire, make our own sheet, make our own gauges. And it was really nice and healing for me to do, and I could see, how so many things weren't necessary. So this is our flux. I have it in this container here. You're gonna see why. I have them a little rough, these containers, and then this is my solder right here. So I have an easy, a medium, and a hard solder. I buy my solders in sheet, and they actually look like this. This is actually an ounce right here. So I usually buy by the ounce. So I'm gonna show you how to cut up your sheet solders. So this actually, they can sit around, see how it's a little bit yellow, it's not as clean as you want it to be. I'm gonna take my sandpaper and I'm just gonna really clean the surface off nicely. You always want clean solder. So clean solder means either sanding or pickling. Pickle, what the pickle does that I talked to you about was it takes off your fire scale, and that's what we really wanted to do, is take off oils, fire scales, anything to have a really nice clean piece. Okay, the way that these work then is the hard, the medium, and the easy. Hard, I'll introduce, and I'll always talk to you through this film about what solders I'm using and why. So the hard will be for the very beginning. Anytime I'm starting a piece, this flows the closest to sterling silver. This hard solder will flow right before your sterling silver will melt. So you have to be careful with this one. But the nice thing about hard solder is that it is almost the same color as your sterling silver. So you'll hardly be able to see any solder flow when you are cleaning up your piece. Medium solder flows at a little bit lower temperature than the hard solder. So I use medium solder for almost everything. Every time I go in, I could multiple times, I solder with medium over and over again. The nice thing is you have a copper lift that comes out each time you solder, so it will get closer and closer. If I'm going in 2-3 times to solder with the medium, it'll get closer to the same color as a hard solder, but this flows at a much lower temperature. So you'll see, you want to start with hard, go to medium. This is easy. I don't solder with easy very often. I don't really like easy very often, but it sure is useful. So easy solder, I will just use this when I put on ring bands, when I'm putting on the ends, and I'll show you easy solder today too. It really just flows almost like a puddle. So for me, you can easily get an excess of easy solder. And it's so interesting because you do need a lower flame, but every time you're building and working with your piece, you're getting more and more silver onto your piece, so your piece is actually getting to be more of a heat sink, and I'll talk about that later. So first things first, I want to show you this solder, and I'm just going to show you how to cut it up. This is the, get in here, cut this up. I'll just cut up a little bit. Okay, see how beautiful that end is? Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hold my finger here, and I am going to just get in and cut. Now I'm not cutting my finger because there's a little bit of space. And literally, you'll be able to see a close-up of how tiny I'm cutting my solder. You want your solder as small as possible. You want it to be able to flow way sooner than your sterling silver will flow. So that's really how you cut it up. This is beautiful. I love coming in and having all this solder cut up for me. I know I don't have to do all this behind the scenes preparatory work, so it's nice. I made a lot for us today. So the next important thing are my pliers. Okay, there is 3 essential pliers that I love. Is the needle nose pliers. These are rounds. So you're really I'm gonna be able to turn round surfaces very nicely and easily. The other plier that I'm going to use is just the chain nose. This does not have any type of markings inside. I don't want to unnecessarily, they don't have teeth in there. I don't want to put teeth into my into my work unnecessarily. And then the third pair is my very favorite, and these are the tapered chain nose that I just love. I find I use these so much in my work. Now these actually are Allen Revere pliers. They're actually kind of constructed from orthodontist pliers. If you notice something different about these, they don't have the spring on here. I can get a lot more strength from my pliers to manipulate. Since I've been teaching for so many years, I see some people come in with pliers that are not that strong, and they can, your arms are having to work too hard. I found that this will save you a ton of money. You can buy a $20 set of pliers that you see, a whole set of pliers on Rio Grande, and you can cut off here's one of them that was on Rio Grande. I'm gonna show you how to cut these springs off and cut them off, and you'll have pliers like these. Really, these save your hands. You'll see when I work these pliers, my carpal tunnel, I'm not having any problem there. If I'm using a spring plier, you're gonna see that my wrist is, really having to work hard. And sometimes I just can't get that strength in there that I want to. So if I'm gonna suggest pliers, you could suggest Allen Revere. Weber's has good pliers. They do have the springs, but you could buy a $20 set, and I'm gonna show you right now. This is just a little inexpensive one. There's not even a name brand. And I'm just gonna get in and peel this off right here. And I can cut down lower. Okay, you can see that spring right here. And then I'm just going to peel. Sometimes I have to pull a little harder, but there we go. And I took this off here. So I'll finish up this side. You don't want to hurt yourself this way. Okay. And, okay. Oops. So these scissors, these tin snips, I'm gonna call them. They're really scissors, but tin snips, you can buy any kind of tin snips. And then I'm gonna pull off this spring here. And then I'll have a very, very useful pair of pliers. Here's my chain nose and tapered chain nose, no teeth inside, and I have a really beautiful pair of pliers. Truthfully, it's like these might be a little large for me. You have to find the size that you love. I find this is really a good size for my hands that work. So that's that. There's your pliers. One other thing that I want to show you is snips. These are double flush snips. There's a number of different kinds. This side here, if I were to snip a wire, you would get a very flush edge, a straight edge. If I snip it this way, you're gonna get a pinched edge. So you always wanna use your pliers snipping with this edge here. So those are some nice tools. And that's kind of the idea of all of my tools that I have here. It's, the soldering, the picks, the tools. So all of this you'll find there's a supply list, and you're welcome to download and just get in your studio and get started. You're gonna see me wearing my Optivisor. What these are is magnifiers. Just through time, I really love to be able to see exactly what's happening at my work close up. This is a $20 pair. These are good, they're magnifiers. Oops, these are a little dirty, but you guys would have clean ones. But these are $20, and they're the regular magnifiers. Whether you wear glasses, they can go under them. These are nice for me, so you're gonna see me with these on when I start the filming. Okay, so I think that's really what I want to show you guys today. I'm gonna get into moving over to my other station, and I'll just show you the materials that I'm gonna work on today. These are my materials that I cut out, and I'll talk more about the silver and the materials when we get over to my station. Okay, the alchemy of soldering. This is a philosophy of soldering. So you're gonna see some really unusual, different types of ways that I'm putting things together. For one, here's some of the material that I'm working with today. This is bezel wire. I order these right here. Normally I work with sterling silver strip, it's called. And this is a 24 gauge. And you can see the different measurements. This is a 1/2 inch. This is a 1/4 inch, and this is an 1/8 inch. So you really can order your strips in any type of size that you'd like to. This is actually a beaded wire that I'm gonna show you how to use these today, the beaded wire. It's still bezel wire, and there's all different kinds of bezel wire. And filigree, there's just the serrated edges. I want to start with the basics, so you're just really going to see me working with this real straight one here. So if you're just starting out and you're not, you're thinking you want to do a jewelry, first of all, you could start making and selling your jewelry right away, and start generating your own money. Second of all, what I would say to you is that the natural way that jewelry is presented is from a goldsmith point of view. It's putting you, not to say anything bad about it, but it's like you're boxing and boxing and boxing and boxing, where I see people so afraid to make a move. So if you take a traditional course and you're a person that it didn't quite fit in with, just know that you can have this freedom. You don't have to only be a jeweler from this route. What I want to teach, because I've done fashion and all, just so many different markets and the art field, trained as an artist, you may be an artist and you don't have to go into this tiny little box to build jewelry. So really breathe, have your freedom, use your skills and your foundation of what you have. I want you to do this for you. You're actually, the difference from being a goldsmith and being a jewelry designer is an art form, and you're building your jewelry and your art form from who you are. I'm gonna be your cheerleader here, because I'm always like, yay, the crazier, just do what you wanna do. Freedom, that's the word, freedom. Put that in your talisman. So the one today that I'm working with this is actually a fine silver. I want to show you, this is the traditional silver to work with. It's a fine silver. I'm showing you this today just because the fold over is so natural and easy. The way that you will decide on the size of your bezel wire is when you lay this down, you need the lip to come slightly above your stone, so you can burnish this down onto your stone. So that's kind of the important thing. The only thing we need right now is the silver and this piece here. So the way I'm gonna start, I just actually need a smaller piece than you think. So the way I'm gonna start, let's see, I'm just putting a little bit of the bezel wire around the side. So I'm just gonna get into this corner, and you can use your awl right here. Really, I just need a piece about this big. So this is probably, I'm gonna measure things for you here so you guys have everything down. Okay, it's like 1.25 inches by 1 inch is really the size piece that we're gonna need for what we're building today. We're building a piece like this, so it's really exciting. You're gonna get to see the filigree, you'll get to see the silver, but really what is important to me is talking through all the steps. That's really all I'm talking about. The cool thing is you get a beautiful piece by the end of it. So I'm actually just gonna cut straight across with mine, and I am going to use my sandpaper. Remember I said clean metal. So with cleaning metal, you either want to use the pickle, which I'll show you in a little bit when I'm ready to pickle, or you're going to want to show, just sand it down. So here's my piece here. I'm just going to get my edges nice and flat on here. And I want this as flush as possible. If you really want a flush piece of metal, it's good to use a jeweler saw, but I use my snips all the time. These are nice. Okay, so for setup, I'm just gonna show it to you this way. So here's what I'm building. And I have just a short piece here, but really what I'm gonna wanna do is make sure this end right here is super straight across by cutting. Once I cut, I'm gonna flatten this out here. There's all kinds of cutters to make sure that your bezel wire is super straight up and down. You know, a good way to test is just right on the edge. I'm gonna bring it over here to my bench pin that I talked about. I didn't show you guys this earlier, but you can actually, the way that I get a straight edge is I'm just gonna hold this right on the edge and just do a little bit of filing right here. So my edge is straight. Fine silver is, fine silver will melt at a lower temperature. So that's why usually I use the, you're gonna see with different techniques, I use different types of wire. This one, it'll be nice and safe with a fine silver. This fine silver actually wraps around a stone much easier. It's almost, you know, it's annealed, it's much softer. So I'm gonna actually wrap my piece around like this. You can see where it overlaps. And I leave a tiny bit of space. I leave a tiny bit of space because what happens is when you're soldering, you get a little bit of solder on the inside and it takes up some of the room. So normally I will keep my, you know, I'll tighten it right up, butt it right up against each other, and then I just loosen it up a little bit. So I'm gonna cut it, if you can see this marker here, I'm gonna cut it on the outside of that marker. But I really wanna focus on getting a straight line. Also, if you're not sure about, you know, cut it just a tiny bit longer because I'm gonna have to go in and file my edge a little bit. See how I left an edge there? Okay, so I'm gonna get in. Now let me test my whole piece. If I were to put it together like this, ooh, it does fit beautifully. I do like that tiny bit bigger. I'm gonna go back over here to my bench pin and I'm going to just get my edge nice and straight. Remember, and now look at this, I already have a marker. I already have a marker that's marked on here, which yay, because I should be able to fit this together so beautifully that you won't even be able to tell where the seam is. So I'm gonna go ahead and bend this into each other. You wanna get this a little bit spring-loaded, and doesn't matter the shape of your piece right now. We don't need to worry about that yet. This part, just take your time, get it perfect. You want to make sure it can stay there on its own. Once you get it to a good place, you're just gonna hold your piece down like this, and I want to make sure it's flush in both areas. Now don't worry if it takes you an hour to get it perfect. You know, just don't worry about timing. I love when I make mistakes because then I can show you how to correct them. And I also love when I make mistakes because then you guys know you don't have to get it perfect the first time. This is flux. So what this does, I talked about this in tools, but this actually keeps your piece from getting fire scale. So solder, when you're soldering, my solder will not flow onto fire scale. You need to set everything up perfectly. So that's why I'm sanding my piece. You need an absolutely beautiful, clean, pristine piece for the solder to flow. No fire scale, which you're gonna see the blackened fire scale. Now and also my solder too. You saw how I sanded my solder and got a piece going. I'm gonna put a couple pieces. This is hard solder. You don't want too many laying around. This is a natural brush, so when I put it onto my hot pieces, it's not plastic and it's not gonna get my piece dirty. So the whole time, whenever I'm soldering, I'm gonna be talking dirty and clean metal. So to set yourself up perfectly, you need a perfectly butted join that's butted perfectly, because solder won't really be able to fill in the gaps very easily. It can sometimes, but since it melts at a lower temperature, it'll break open at a different point. So you really want your edge butted together perfectly like this one is, and then you want your piece to be completely clean like this one is, sanded or pickle. Then you want your piece to be You want it to be fluxed because the flux will keep the fire scale out when I'm heating this. And then I want to make sure that my hard solder, I'm going to start with the hard for the seam, because once I start and get into all this other solder, I do not want my seam to come apart. So anytime I'm away from the main piece, I use hard solder. And then anytime I'm soldering on the main piece, I use medium solder. You can see I'm not using any screens yet because I need my piece to sit flush to the bottom, and you know, so it's staying flush. So I'm gonna go in and I'm just gonna heat very gentle. This is my flame, and you're gonna just see the time. Even though it's a hard solder and you think I'd need a lot, I'm actually just going to use about a 2-inch all the way out to the end. Just where the blue is, about 1.5 inches. I already taught this course once, and I had so many people ask me, how big should my flame be at different points? So I thought, oh my gosh, this time around, I'm just gonna use a ruler so you guys see. So I'm gonna get in here and just heat up my end. You can see my end getting this kind of chalky look. Once I heat it up, it'll actually accept more. And you want that chalky edge on here. I want it a little bit warm. One of the things that I learned from going into this kind of real rustic type of soldering is that once this is warm, I'm gonna be able to get my piece of solder just to stick to it. So that only happens when it's warm. If you've ever soldered before and put wet flux on and then put your solder on, it pops all over the place. So this is a really cool technique that I learned really way in the outback on just heating up your piece, putting your solder on here. My solder actually has to touch, so this is actually done really nicely. It has to touch both sides. It can only flow across each of the sides. This could be moved a little bit more to the right. So the only way I can get this piece to be moved over is I can take a little bit of my flux and just get my piece moved over by re-wetting it again. It really needs to sit in the middle, right like that. Now, because my piece is wet, I want to make sure that because my piece is wet, my flux made it wet, I want to start from farther away. I say elbows on the table. So you can see I have my elbows on the table. I'm actually getting myself a little bit lower. You can see how it popcorned around a little bit. The first thing I do is I'll heat up my piece so my pick can work along with this if it has to. Always have your pick or your paintbrush in your hand, and I'm just going to get in and kind of warm it up gently. I actually want to get my heat going in the center, because if I get my heat going in the center, it's going to heat my piece up beautifully and it'll pull it in and it'll take it off of the surface. That's why I start with it on the surface. Ta-da, it was nice and quick, low flame, just take your time through everything. I actually then quench my piece in the flux, because this is called pickling flux, and what that means is the pickling flux will actually take the fire scale off. So you saw the piece getting blackened. You can see on the inside where I have, you can see that the solder flowed. You want to make sure your solder flowed on the inside right there. I have it on the outside. I'm going to have to brush a little bit of that off, but the first thing I want to do, I want to make sure my board isn't warm, and I'm going to get back in and I'm going to set this inside my bezel. And you can use your pliers down the road. I'll show you different. Fine silver is going to bend a little easier and a little quicker, which is why I wanted it to be, in this first course here. So I've got a little bit of room. I just use my pliers. Down the road, I'll show you a couple other tools that are not that expensive either. But really, for years, I just used pliers for burnishing. I started when I was an artist, and really, I didn't want to purchase a lot of tools. Okay, I'm actually just going to bring things up on here to work with. So if I have a stone that the bottom can, I don't have to worry that the bottom, if I have a crystal that's clear, like these stones here, I don't keep my stone in here when I rub it across the surface, but I want to get the bottom of my silver bezel. This is your bezel. I want to get the bottom of it nice and flat and clean. So this will clean anything up, so I really don't have to get in and pick all this at all. Even if my whole piece was black, which, by the way, fine silver doesn't get black, but you know, I really want to see a nice silver edge around the edge. I want it to be nice and flush. Rub your hand over and make sure that edge is nice and flush. Voila. I think I'll go ahead and, with this stone in here, I'm going to bring it back over to my bench pin and just get in and kind of clean up this edge on here a little bit. Make sure it's clean with my file. I don't want a lot of solder on the edge here. There we go. Looks nice. With the stone in here, it doesn't pull it out of shape at all. There. You want to make sure that line is covered up. No worries, you'll be able to do it. And, you know, because I started, you could start yours on the inside, but you really don't want to take up extra room. This is a beautiful rose agate, by the way. Okay, now look at this, it's ready to go. So I'm going to put my little screen on. Remember I talked about screens. So this screen is a small screen. I'm actually working with a small piece where I don't need a lot of heat. I need to come up under my piece, but because butane heat, a butane torch is not that hot, I need to come up and under my piece and anneal it from under. I guarantee you can solder this whole piece just by getting under and annealing your piece. And annealing I'll show later on. You just can heat your screen. You can heat your screen hot enough where when you lay your piece down, it will be soldered. Now, I want to make sure that I keep my soldered seam away, so I'm going to take my stone out. So I don't want to place it this way because I'll be hitting right onto where I soldered it. Still, I want to protect that join and keep the edge away a little bit. Okay, I'm going to get over to this edge so I don't have to waste my silver. Get my paintbrush out, and I'm going to come in this way and just get my solder spread around. Once I get my torch on, it'll be a little bit louder. So you're gonna see, this will be an interesting process because I'm gonna show you attaching a piece to the back. So I'm gonna put on a little bit extra solder. Now, for me, don't worry, don't worry if there's a tiny little bit of space, in your piece. This one actually is pretty flush. There's a tiny little bit of space right there with where the seam is, which means I could go back over it with my sandpaper. So I'm gonna go back in and I'm just gonna actually try to clean up this bottom a little bit more. Anytime you sand, with the fine silver, it'll take it off much quicker than when you start getting into sterling silver. So this is a good way to work. Okay. Get my little bit of flux on. You can still see that there is a tiny little bit of space right here. Don't worry about that because really what will happen is by the time your piece is heated up, it just will relax and flow into your piece. So I have this going, I'm gonna get in and I'm gonna dry up my solder right here. Just kind of dry it up a little bit so I can get my, there we go. By the way, if your flux starts getting really, with a lot of this cloudiness in here, you just want to add a little bit of water to that. I'm going to do that to mine right now. I just put in maybe like a tablespoon. You don't want your flux this billowy, this cloudy, so it means I just need a little bit more water. So, okay, now I'm moving on to my medium. So here we go. I've got my small pieces. Because this is heated up, I can just bring my solder around the side. Once my solder starts flowing, it really will just flow completely around my piece. And this is where I like to be able to rotate my piece around. Now, remember again, like I told you before, this solder needs to be touching everything that needs to be soldered. So this solder needs to be touching both the bezel wall and the sheet plate underneath. If I need to move my solder over, just bring it over to the sides like that. You're gonna see a nice flow. I am actually putting in more solder than I need because this will actually give me, I'm putting in more than I need. This will give me the solder that I'll need to solder also down this next layer of beaded wire that I'll be putting down. So you'll see, it'll be nice and easy and good to do. Okay, everything's cold here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start with my heat under. I'm gonna be lifting my screen and getting this soldering board really warmed up. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get in and I'm gonna lift, let's see if I can get in with this, and I'm gonna lift this piece here and get under. Really, I'm just annealing it, which means to warm it up equally in all spaces. Okay, my flame needs to be a little bit hotter this time, and I'm gonna get under. Remember I talked about it, it's really just getting completely under my piece. Heating it evenly is my purpose right now. You can see everything drying, so I'm gonna make sure everything gets back. Yep, everything gets back. Oh, my flux really is pretty colorful. Okay, I'm gonna get under and just warm up the bottom of this board. This is way too much flux, but see, it's good that I'm making mistakes because you guys will be able to learn from that. The next time I get into solder, my flux will be not as billowy. We're just sitting in some dry weather. Okay, so now what I could even do is, remember my purpose is to get onto the top of here, and I'm gonna heat this up. You see my piece getting dirty, but it really isn't as dirty as you think. It's kind of a clean soldering dirty. Okay, once I get that done, I'm gonna do elbows on the table, and I'm gonna get in. I'm still working with my screen, getting my screen heated, and getting my metal heated. I can even get into the inside a little bit, but it really is just kind of working on the outside, really working on this edge, popping in and out. Once you get it warm enough, don't worry, it'll flow. If I have to, I can get back under it again. Up. See, I'm annealing it from under. There you go. See that flow? I'm going to spin it around and just work. There we go. It went all the way around. Now, I want to bring all that solder around. You can see the white strip here. I want to bring all that solder around because I'm going to use this solder when I get to the next piece. And voila. Really, once you get it, it really is like riding a bike. You just set all your elements up so they work perfectly. That's all. Now I'm going to let it just cool for a little bit. And this is going to be ready to go into the pickle. This is the pickle that I talked to you guys about earlier. I just have some water that I started getting to a nice boil. You really don't want this to get too hot. Once I get my pickle in, I'll usually either have it at a low, or for me, my lid is sometimes halfway off all day, so I'll keep it on high for that reason. But I'm just gonna get in, there's our pickle, what it looks like, and I'm gonna put in, oh my gosh, these are teaspoons, so I'm gonna put in, sometimes I'll do like a quarter of a cup. I like to put in a nice good amount. Once I have my pickle in here, this pickle I will use for a month or 2 months, or until it just starts giving me trouble with taking the fire scale off. You see how dirty this piece looks, right? I'm stirring up my pickle into here. You see how dirty my piece looks? You don't want to put steel into pickle. I want to remind you guys, that's why I showed you guys these copper tongs earlier. The copper tongs, you only want to put copper or silver, or you could even put bronze. You never want to put steel in. What happens if you put steel in your pickle is that whatever object you have in there, all the copper will stick to your piece, and now it'll be coated with copper. So I just use a little screen. Some people use, so I can find my piece again. This has the inexpensive crock pots, I notice, are black and they're hard to see your piece sometimes, especially when they're dirty. But the ones that are expensive actually are white inside. Those are better because you can see your piece easier. You can, some of the things people do instead of a screen, this isn't a steel screen, this is plastic. It's really cool, so it can go right inside here. Some of the things people do instead of a screen is, I see a lot of makeshift screens where people maybe are drilling holes in the bottom of a yogurt can and putting them in, drilling holes in the bottom of a plastic container, and just lifting it in and out. This one actually might be nice just to kind of insert in there. And you can see my piece getting cleaner and cleaner in here. So you'd want to leave it in the pickle. It's a corrosive, so it actually will just kind of take all that fire scale off by like how salt is a corrosive. So, you know, the longer you keep it in here, you don't want to keep it in there overnight or for a couple hours because it is a corrosive. But, you know, once I can see my fire scale coming off of here, I'm in good shape. So I'm going to take that out of there. I don't have to wait until it's perfect at this point. I still have a lot of steps to go. There is, every time my piece gets pickled or fired, there is a little bit of copper. You know, here I'm pulling it out of here now. You can see how nicely my seam. This is just the flux that's on the side. If I kept this in the pickle longer, I could get it nice and clean. I'm just going to use a wire brush over here and you'll see how that works. This is the wire brush that I use for cleanup, but I'm just going to get in and kind of clean up this. You dip it in water afterwards because clean metal means no pickle, no fire scale, pretty. Nice and clean. Okay, so now I'm just going to clean this up. Okay, my piece is ready for the next layer. I got back into my deep authentic work again after a huge period of time where I was deep in commercial. So at different times in your life, you know, to get back into who you are and who I am, I went back into the raw, and it was such a healing good period of time for me because I went back into really who I am, and I had to build from scratch. So, you know, many times in my life, I'm really to this place of simplicity. And I find many times in my life that when I can get to this place of simplicity, I'm able to expand into a more complexity. So that's the interesting thing about it. This actually experience of just really building everything from scratch, bezeling objects, this brought me to the simplicity of this course and the tools that I'm using now. I want to be able to put my tools into 2 Ziploc bags and, you know, head out the door and be able to build in the middle of India, build in the middle of Morocco. I'm a silversmith and I'm an artist, and it feels so good to be back to this place that I started. I call it a decommercializing process. So in this course, I'm asking you to maybe do a little bit of inward time and just kind of breathe and get in and really work in your own studio. Don't hop around and take classes, but really kind of take this inward time. This is really just a time to get in introspectively, and don't worry about what the outcome will be. Don't worry about how your pieces are going to look on someone, what they're going to do for someone. You're really just doing this for yourself and for your own process, and it's such a healing process. And that really is a part of intentional metalsmithing that's really exciting. I know I've had that happen for me, and I'd love to turn you guys onto that through my course. Okay. I could actually cut this extra edge off. I don't need this on here now. It's just a heat sink. So the more metal that you have, the more of a heat sink that your piece is. Okay. Beautiful. I am going to show, this is some beaded wire that I purchased, just like this. It's on a roll that I showed you earlier. I'm going to take my edge again and get in and just file it off. You can see how handy your file is, right? Now, I'm just bringing it around. You just have to find a way to hold this down. You know, you need so many different hands. If we actually had 3 hands, we'd be in really good shape. In different countries, I've seen craftspeople and artists, how they can use different parts of their body while they're building pieces. It's pretty cool. So that's always what I love to do too. But on camera, I'm just using my hands. Okay, so you want to push this in. It's harder for me to visually show this, but here we go here. I'm going to grab these pliers that I love so much that are tapered. Or maybe not. I can just grab these, and I actually am going to make sure that this edge is tucked in. So when this edge is tucked in, This is the trickiest part. With solder on here, it usually ends up making it a little bit smaller. So this is a good way to hold it together. So I can see for an absolutely exact, I can cut here. Let me make sure. You don't ever want it to be too short. I'm gonna kind of put it right onto here. This one looks like it would make more sense. Okay, now you can see I put a marker on both sides. Remember what I was talking about? That it's so much easier to see where you have to solder together with your marker. Thank God for markers. Okay. So with this, you can use your wire cutters, or you can use your snips. With wire cutters, I kind of like using wire cutters because they're nice and flush. So literally, I'll get a straight edge with that. See that nice straight edge? Now, let me check. Let me get my piece back up here and let me check sizing. It's always good to cut it and then check your sizing again. Looks like it's actually might be a little bit big. Okay, so I can file off a little bit. Don't really go in and start cutting. You would be surprised how little you actually need to take off. I'm just going to take off that little part right there with my file. So start small. You know, sometimes I'll be like, oh my gosh, there's a big gaping hole. I need to cut a lot of, you know, remove a lot so it'll sit flush. And then after the fact, I'll find that it's not the case at all. A little goes a long way. Okay. All right, now with this cut, let me get it around here one more time. Ooh, I think it's gonna fit perfectly. Okay, so I'm gonna move my bezel to the side, bring my pliers down, and I just now again, work this exactly like you were working your, work it exactly the same way that you did your bezel wire. Just consider it bezel wire. There it is, nice and flush. If you didn't know, you know, make sure it's hard to tell where the end is. So I'm gonna flip this over. Good thing I have marker on. Line it up perfectly. You know, the nice thing is when you're doing this work is that you actually, there's a lot of really popular work right now and a lot of fun work just with fusing and melting and, you know, just all these different, you know, all these different ways where a couple years ago, you know, it's art jewelry that kind of I'm seeing around, just stretching the possibilities and patching things up and, you know, all of that. So it's one of my favorite things to do. Now I'm going to get this a little bit warmed up. The marker will start coming off the marker will start coming off, but now I'm going to get this right between my marker pieces, right here. Oops. A little bit stuck on here. Sometimes that happens, guys. I like when things like this happen because you guys can see, you know, it's like things aren't perfect all the time, right? Anytime you're putting together bezel wire, you want to work with a hard solder. Anytime I'm away from my piece, hard solder. There we go. Perfectly placed. Elbows on the table. I'm going to get in and kind of warm this whole piece up. Be very gentle with beaded wire. Very gentle. And you don't want to ruin your bead by putting on too much solder. So just a tiny piece. There we go. Okay. And this solder will be able to flow even better. So I'm going to put this in here. It's a little bit dirty. Usually when I'm building, you want, you know, it's a good thing it'll be a nice tight fit. Sometimes it's so tight that I have to bring my pliers in to be able to get this going. Look at how beautiful that fit is. Now you guys can see this is dirty, so I'm gonna put the whole piece in the pickle. You guys already saw the pickle. Okay, nice and quick. You know, when really in the end, when I'm completely done, do I worry about keeping it in the pickle for a longer period of time? Screen, time for the screen. If you actually want to try setting, make sure your stone sets as you're going. I'll show you a different tip for that. Don't I have that in here? Okay. All right, now I should have put enough solder on the inside. So when I get this nice and flowing, I'm just gonna flex my whole piece and hopefully I will have enough solder. I'm gonna reheat this solder that was around the bezel wire. And this saves me, because I've tried different things. I used to actually show a little bit of sweat soldering to get this around, and putting solder under here, but one of the other chapters I'll show sweat soldering. I think I have enough solder where it'll flow through. We'll see. If we don't, I'll be able to place a couple pieces down. Now, if you can't get your beaded wire to lay flat, this is where you can get in with your pick and just work your piece around. So you're gonna see what I do. This is my tool. I am always working with my titanium pick. So I'm gonna dip it in flux, and so I can work with it, I'm just gonna heat it up. So you wanna heat this up a little. The water is in. I'm gonna heat this up a little. Move my stone so it doesn't crack. Your stone will actually crack from heat, so you have to be careful about that. See how this looks. Okay, and there we go. And what else did I want to say? I wanted to tell you guys one more thing. Of course, medium solder, I just need, this isn't a good edge here because it's right at it's longer here. So I'm gonna bring my whole piece over to the screen. I kind of like a screen where I can lift this a little bit so I can get under. Now I've got a lot of metal working against me, a lot of silver working against me, which is called a heat sink. So when you have a heat sink, because now I have the base of the bezel, I have the bezel wire, I have the beaded wire going on, every single time that I'm adding silver to my work, I need to get my flame a little bit hotter and hotter. So let's see, I'm gonna say this one is almost, well, this one is like 1 3/4 inch. I could even turn it up a little bit. I'm doing a lot of my work from under. So my pick is ready. I've just altered my screen. I'm gonna get in, I'm gonna hit my brick under. I wanna get the inside and the outside really nice and hot. So really what I need to do is heat up completely and evenly under this screen. And again, I'm using the small screen for this because I don't need it to be super hot for this piece to flow. So at this point, I'm really just heating the brick up under. You can see the color change happen. After I get the brick heated under, I'm gonna heat under so I'm really heating the screen. I'm not trying to hit my piece from under. I'm hitting my screen. Now I'm gonna get to the inside, and as I'm soldering this, it's a little high now. I'm just gonna hold it down in different areas. So wherever my heat goes is where the solder will flow. Be careful where your seams are. I have both my seams in the same spot. Now remember, because I'm using my solder from the inside, I have to get that inside nice and warmed up. I think I have it. And then it's beautiful. You don't have that much cleanup to do. There we go. It looks beautiful. Now, the way to test it, I could see the solder flow. I saw my pieces turn all the way up. You always want to cool your piece a little bit. You can see here, I put both seams on the same side. I'll probably have to sand that up a little bit. You know, when it's dirty, you really can see that. Before it goes in the pickle, you want to quench it. And let me see. You want to, oh, this side I can see it's not all the way soldered down. So that means I need to get a piece of solder under here. Because I've taught for so many years, see right there, it's clean enough where I can get solder right under. So I'm always really glad when you know, something doesn't work 100%, because then you can see how to do it an alternative. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this piece of solder under. Now, if I did, I'm cutting off the sides, but that's all I need is one piece of solder under. Now, you can always tell how you're doing with soldering evenly if you look on the inside. If you see your bezel wall, if you see your solder came up your bezel wall, that means that you're getting your bezel wall too hot. You have to heat your whole piece equally all at the same time. So when you walk up to your piece, your brain has to think, all right, I've got, I'm setting you up in the alchemy of soldering because I've got a 24 gauge fine silver and I've got a 24 gauge sheet silver. So everything should heat up equally. The bezel wall, anything that is vertical is going to heat up quicker because there's more oxygen around it. Anything that's horizontal will take longer, and you're going to see this process through all of it. So whenever I come up to my work, the question that I'm asking is, how can I heat this piece up equally? And really my question through this whole process is, where does 90% of the heat go? Where does 70%? Where does, so really what I'm showing you that I'm doing when I did the base plate, I put 90% of my heat needed to hit this base plate right here. This is the base plate. So 90% of my heat needed to hit the base plate. 10% needed to hit the bezel wall. So that's really what you need to be thinking, is percentages. Now that I went in and reheated this again, you can see this is sitting on the base plate. So still again, 90% of my heat needs to hit the base plate, 10% need to be hitting the bezel wall and the beaded pieces. If you see solder going up the side of your walls, that means that you have more than 10% of your heat. You probably have 20% or, going up the wall. If I have my solder spread all the way around the base plate, then you know that you've done like 95 to 100% of your solder flow. Once your solder starts flowing, you can't really go back unless you push it back with your stick. So here's some of the things you're gonna run across as a beginner. Always use your soldering pick. If you see your solder flowing, like watch, I'm gonna heat it too much here. There's my flux. I'm gonna pull it out to the side. Solder is gonna flow wherever your heat goes. So remember, here I'm trying to get 90% under, but I'm gonna dry this piece. If I came in just from the side like this, you're gonna see this piece of solder that should go around my beaded wire, you're gonna see it flow out towards me. So this piece, because I have 24 gauge, I can get in and work with the center. Okay, there's my solder, I'm getting my piece cleaned up. If I heat up too much just in this corner, I'm hoping I can get my, it's harder once you start knowing what you're doing because you can't go back and make the mistakes that you want to. Which, I'm gonna be cutting this off, this excess base plate anyway. Let me get it heated under first. And you want to be careful with like turning your heat up because you really don't want your piece to come apart. Okay, there we go. And you can press down a little bit to get this going. I'm trying to make an intentional mistake for you guys. Well, it didn't really go. Normally if you, this actually went really nicely. So you want to be able to see your bezel wire on this side too. Well, sorry guys, I did a nice job, but I'm going around and holding down. If you start seeing a different color silver, it won't matter with here because I really am cutting this off flush. When we start getting into different types of techniques, you have sheet metal that's left, you want to keep things under and contained. So your objective is to keep your silver under the bezel wire, under the beaded wire, and contained, so you don't have a lot of cleanup afterwards, so you don't have to worry about things. Everyone really has a different studio techniques, that they use. I'm gonna quench this, but that one got soldered. I'm sorry, I couldn't show you guys how to pull your solder outward, but if you did, you just have to really get in there and clean it up with your steel brush. This just has to be pickled now. So, I am going to cut off the sides of my piece, but it's a good indication to let yourself know how to heat it up. You're always going to just start by heating your screen, get it as hot as possible, get your soldering block as hot as possible. Then when you put your piece on, still, you know, try to get under with your flame in all different directions and angles, getting under your metal. So your piece literally will, your base plate will be 90% of the heat, and your bezel wire just kind of flows and flush on top of that. And that's the objective. I'm gonna cut this part off before I put in the pickle. And this is really, I'm gonna use the snips for this. A lot of my work, oh my gosh, so much of my work I can use my snips for. I really, you know, the snips are so nice and strong, and circles, you just have to be a little careful. This is why I like my magnifiers. You don't want to cut into the sides at all or get too close to the seam. I probably will have a little filing on the edges. If you use a jeweler's saw, which I'll, you know, that's just going to be a different segment, you will not have to do as much filing. If you use snips, you do a little bit more filing, but I've got some good tools for that too. So get this last piece off. I'm really good next to the edge. This is gonna pickle, and then I'm gonna fire. These type of pieces you wanna save. Oh my gosh, these would be so useful for so many things, and you'll see later. So back in the pickle. Okay, so here's what it looks like. It's still not quite as clean yet, but it's gonna look a lot like this piece here, but a different stone. Oh, it's gonna look really nice. Okay, good. So looking good. I just get in and, you know, that we had almost enough to get around the sides. That was good. Clean this up a little bit. I'm gonna come over here to my bench pin, just getting around my edges and filing. With filing, what I want to say about the file is you always want to file away from you. So, and you always want to file straight up and down. So when I'm filing, you can see here, I'm actually looking straight down on my piece. You don't want to file. This takes off a lot. This is a pretty good file. This one's called a bastard file. There are smaller files. I like to use this file. This one is a, you know, these are actually it's a mill bastard file, but these are really nice just to take away a good amount. And you always file away. If you pull it upward, you're just gonna be hurting your metal. So I put it right on the edge like here. Look at my support system here. And I'm just gonna bring this piece down like this and kind of a little bit under, because that's where my silver is. You can see the back of this, how beautiful it's looking. There we go. You want it to look as nice in the back as it does in the front. And I just really don't want that overlap. So here's the back. With the back also, I'm gonna get in with a little bit of my sandpaper and get the back sanded. .24 gauge. So most people, I have to tell you, with the butane torch that I'm doing, actually one of the things that I do that's unusual is most people work with an 18 gauge with jewelry. Because I build really big pieces, and because I work with a cooler flame, I work with a 24 gauge. That is like my normal, the 24 gauge that I work with. It heats up quicker. 18 gauge, you may need a little hotter. You know, this size, it's not really a problem, but I can really do every single thing. I also find with jewelry, I don't want my jewelry getting really heavy. So, the idea of working with the 24 gauge, I can keep really light jewelry. When I even get up into earrings, I'll start using even a 26 gauge to a 28 gauge, which, you know, you can research the gauges. So I use really some light gauging. Okay, the next step now is I want to put a bail on here, and then I'm going to be all done with my silver, all done with my work, and I'm going to show you how to make some jump rings. We're just going to do a real small jump ring on here. So I'm going to want my needle nose pliers. This is an 18 gauge wire because I'm just putting a little delicate one on here. You know, this is a nice, simple, regular bail. And what I'm gonna do is just bring this around and create some jump rings. These you can use at any time in life, these jump rings. And you know, it's easier to make a bunch of them than just one. Oh my gosh, it's so hard to make one. You can see how I'm turning it around to this bigger part right here. I'm just bringing everything to the length of it, and then they all end up being the same size. I'm gonna stop, so I'm just bringing them around and around. I'm gonna stop right here because I want, of course, my top pieces to work here nicely. Hit it with the flush. And then what I'm gonna do is get in like this. Oop. Give me a bunch of them. And you can use any kind of wire you want to. I just used a flat wire. You can use the beaded wire if you wanted a shank like that. Okay, let me get out my magnifiers. Sometimes you have to go in and file up the edges a little bit. This gets to be crazy when you get small. See why I have the magnifiers? Okay. Nice and flat. Getting my pieces pushed together. This is also where I love my chain nose pliers. You want your edges to match. And I'm gonna just I solder it together first. And again, you know, create tension with this. I'm gonna solder this together first with a hard, only because if I don't solder this together and I try to solder it onto my piece, my solder is just going to want to solder the jump ring together, and it'll be all for naught. So, let me get my paintbrush. I'm gonna use a hard. I'm laying this flat onto here. I see exactly where I need to lay this. And I'm gonna get in with my hard. Oh, there's a big piece. You just need the tiniest little piece of solder. You can see how I am an artist. It's like my pieces. I think we all, you know what, you guys, I do have to say my studio I cleaned it up for this film. I'm gonna show you guys at different points, not on this film, but you know, if you're on my, Instagram, you'll see my studio. This is cleaned up for you guys. I really have quite a busy and, you know, a little bit more hectic studio, but isn't this nice with it clear? Okay, again, there we go here. I'm just laying it right next to here, circulating my heat around. I could even push it in a little. There we go. Okay, that was the hard. Now, this is where the locking pliers come in handy. Look at all this work that we have been doing. I'm gonna quench it in the flux to get it clean. Look at all this work that we have been doing with just the minimal amount of tools. I love it. Okay, so I'm gonna determine what is the top and what is the bottom. If I want to test my stone, this is just wax linen. I just cut off thread. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll drill a hole in the bottom and then I can poke my stone back out if it gets stuck. But just to test it like this, we're not showing the drill this time. That'll be another day. I'm just gonna, look at how pretty that is. Fits in there beautifully. And you can see I'm gonna have enough of an edge to work its way down later. Oh, it's gonna be so pretty. It is one of my favorite colors. Then just pull gently and you can get it back out again. And that's what you do to fit your stone. Good. I know I'm not wasting my time now. Okay, so I'm gonna get in and flux this up over here, and I'm gonna decide, on this piece it doesn't matter, but sometimes you're like, all right, this one is the top, that's the bottom. And I am going to dip this in, and then what I'm gonna do, this is where I pull out the EZ. I talked to you guys about EZ. And with EZ, I am going to just put a little bit of EZ right on top of that hard. And I'm just gonna get that to flow. Now remember, right at this time, I just need the littlest amount of heat. And I want it to hit on this side. So wherever I put heat is where it will flow. Oops, looks like it's good. There we go. See that? That's enough. And now what I'm gonna do, this is a pretty helpful hint. I'm gonna say 97% of your heat is going onto the bezel and 3% is going onto your shank. This is helping me with the locking pliers because I have steel in my, I have steel on here. So this actually is really helping me to, it's really helping me. I actually have a big piece on here right now, but what I do like about this is that I can really see when my piece is heated up enough. Literally, I'm gonna be holding this bale far away, and I'm gonna be heating only this piece, and you'll see 97%. I'm even gonna be going on the inside because I have a nice regular bale, or I'm sorry, bezel wire, so I can even get on the inside. It's big enough. When you start working tiny, you don't really want to get on the inside, but with this I can. So my heat's going to be going here and here, all the way back and forth, and when I see this easy solder flow, then I know I can just attach my piece. So you want to really have elbows on the table. You know, I'm gonna be with this piece here and be ready. You have to make sure you have the muscle memory of getting it attached in the right place. You wanna make sure it's the center. So usually I'll have my piece nice and straight. Now, I need 97, I don't really need the base plate as much because I don't want that solder to fall down into where the beaded wire is. And it's not really sitting on the base plate now, but, so I really wanna just hit my bezel wall for this, wherever your solder is. And I'm gonna turn this up a tiny bit more because, let me make sure I'm straight. Yep, I'm gonna turn it up a tiny bit more, so I'm hitting it in front, hitting it on the side. I'm just hovering my bale just in the background. There we go, see that? That means it's ready. So I'm hovering it in the background. There we go, did you see that happen? But see how messy easy is? Now easy takes longer to cool. So I literally have to hold my piece there and 1, 2, 3. Nice and centered. If I needed to take that off again and reposition it, you just would heat it up. I'll show you guys just for the fun of it. I just would heat it up to get a piece off. This is kind of a good tip to have, an extra little tip here. And then I'll see how that just comes right back off, and then to get it back on again, there we go. Now easy could easily be overheated, so be careful with overheating. You could burn it out super quickly. There. In the pickle, I'm gonna let it sit in there just for a couple minutes, get things scrubbed up, and then I'll just show you guys the final parts of getting this all together. Okay, now I want to show you guys the cleanup. This is fresh out of the pickle. Look how pretty that looks. Remember when I was telling you, you can a little bit see an easy solder, which to me is why it's like, oh my gosh, easy solder. What, you know, is not the easiest. I love hard solder. I really love medium solder. When it comes out of the pickle, it really is coated with a little bit of copper, and it kind of looks a little chalky. So this is why you need to clean this up. If you were just to go straight into your darkening with this powdery color on here, it actually would be kind of dull. So you want to get in, this is where your steel brush, look at how beautiful and shiny I'm bringing this metal to with the steel brush. It really is taking away, this steel brush I adore, it's taking away anything that shouldn't be on here. Like in these corners, there's just a little bit of flux. If I kept it in here longer, I could really get rid of all this flux in the corners. But I think I just want to show you guys this piece. We'll work on things, you know, really when you get more advanced, I'm just trying to show you guys the basics and let you guys start building pieces so you can maybe you know, maybe even start making some money first, be able to purchase your tools. So doing my original work and developing my own voice, this is very, very important if you want your work to stand out. If you know you are the only person in this whole world who has exactly the voice, because you're you and I'm me. If you do your authentic work, you will have no worries. Your work will always sell because you're really putting something out there that no one else can put out there. So my path in life, I am always working to get to my authenticity. You know, and at different times I talk about different points on how to get to my authenticity. Okay, it's nice and clean. It actually looks good. If I need to, I go back in with this little one here for fine details. And now I'm going to get this ready to go into the liver sulfur. That's going to be the darkener. I can make this as dark or light as possible. So come on over here. This is the liver sulfur that I was talking to you about. So this is a gel. It stays for a very long period of time. I just do, I think I was talking about like what? That's probably a half a tablespoon, but that's how I measure mine in. You can actually do, you can actually put steel in here if you need to. Now, I have another screen for my liver sulfur. Makes it nice and easy. I'm gonna turn this to low, and I'm just gonna dip my piece in. You can see how quickly it gets dark. And it's the oxygen that helps change the color. So there it's nice and dark. And I just make sure you quench it in water to get the liver sulfur off. Why do I want this dark? Because this is gonna sit right inside all these beautiful little cracks and spaces, and it really is gonna look beautiful. So let's come back again. I'm gonna do a last layer of cleanup with this piece. And that is just by, look at that shine on here. You're seeing a lot of details and a lot of shine. The steel brush, as opposed to like a brass or a nylon, this really gets your piece so beautiful and shiny. Okay, voila. And this is the point where I talked to you guys about that, you know, I might actually, when it's all done, I might even put a little bit of that sealant on. The nice thing about liver sulfur, which if I'm using this process, liver sulfur is oil-based, so it actually is a sealant. This is sealed, my metal's sealed, it's not gonna get as oxidized, it's not, you know, it won't oxidize. With sterling silver oxidizes in the, when you're off wearing it with oxygen, but also it is strong, much stronger than fine silver. Sterling silver is stronger, which is why we have that. Okay, there's my piece. We already fit it in here. This is the final time. I'm gonna have a hard time getting that out if I needed to, but look at how beautiful that is. Oh my gosh, so pretty. Okay, I'm just gonna use my pliers in this case, and this is how you're gonna hold it in. I'm just gonna bend over. I'm very slowly moving around my piece, and I'm bending my bezel wire over and holding it down. And this is how it works with, this is how it works with fine silver. So once I go around and get it all the way down, then I can really get in here and assertively start bending my edges down. So truthfully, I'm just getting in and working it down with fine silver. This is what fine silver does well. You can move it. Remember when I told you it wasn't as strong? So that's kind of the good thing about fine silver. If I really need, you could use a spoon for this. You could, there are bezel pushers, but I just wanted to show you with my pliers today because I'm talking about not really investing in a lot of tools. Okay, so now if I have one area that's a little stubborn, I'm gonna get in from the side and from the top that's hard to get into. There we go. Look at how beautiful that is. Yay, fantastic. Okay. Voila. It's a beautiful pendant, like these rings. See? And that's it. So enjoy making your pieces, you know, really enjoy. You could make a lot of these, you could use crystals, you know, just really use your imagination on what you want to do with these pieces. So if you liked the philosophy and the way that I go about creating my silver in my studio, I actually, if you want a little bit more, I go into all different types of techniques. I have an e-course called Intentional Metalsmithing, and with this, each month, you're in your studio, you're working with these tools. I'm showing you deeper ways to use tools, deeper ways to build, all different techniques month by month. You go into your own studio, and I ask you go in there 2 to 3 times a week, and just, you know, if you don't have time, that's fine, but you know, it's like you get more out of it. And just by working in your own studio and with me mentoring you, you'll be able to really get this. In 6 months, you'll really have a nice flow of soldering and becoming a silversmith. So if you want to become a silversmith, I teach for 6 months. There's 6 different techniques in there with boxes, bezels expanded, you know, all types of hollow forms, and links is one, links and assembly, and we can just expand and expand, and it's incredible. And I really help you find your own voice and your own work and how to express yourself in your work through sterling silver. So, you know, if you guys want a little bit more, please join me in my e-course called Intentional Metalsmithing, where you'll be building pieces like these.